Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing a standpoint on identity. Now, identity is not exactly what your preferences are. Identity is who you are as a person, not based on your preferences. In a psychological standpoint of view, for example, some might say that man and woman are a societal construct. Meanwhile, the 72 new genders we've just introduced somehow are not societal constructs. If I may make a point regarding this based on a psychoanalytical statement, I would like to invite you into thinking about this in a particular way. And don't mind me, I'm just rambling on. I'm not going off of a script here. I'm just rambling on regarding a concept that I would like you all to understand regarding identity. Back in the days of feminism, for example, which feminism was meant to empower women. But did they empower the femininity of women, or did they approach it by making women more masculine? I would argue that feminism did not empower the feminine aspect of women. It empowered the masculine aspect of women. It encouraged them to be more masculine. And the reason being for that is, yes, for quite some time we had the idea that for women to advance into positions of power that they would have to sleep with their superior, or that it was kind of a blackmail move in order to put the woman in a higher position of power. But when you look at when feminism was first introduced, it was right after the world wars. It was close to the Vietnam War. And in North America, which is where the idea of feminism arose, what was the true purpose of introducing feminism? Was it truly to say women are equal? Or was it to basically create a larger workforce, which we now suffered from because many men died at war? And what would make tax money for the government at that point? Would it not be to create a greater workforce by doubling the amount of workers present in the nation, rather than solely utilizing men to do the work? They would now say women have to work too, and they have to be equal. But in the idea of making women equal, they did not embrace the true purpose of what feminism is about, which is empowering the femininity of women. They instead said, women, you have to be more masculine. Look at the way women are now. Would you not agree to a certain point that most women have a more masculine state of mind when it comes to the relationships, their work ethic? Now let's dive into the idea as well that women were made to be more masculine and men were made to be more feminine. Have you noticed that anytime a man speaks out in terms of a point that women don't agree with, women are constantly saying, that's misogynistic, how dare you? But women are constantly pointing out something called toxic masculinity, which is a separate way of being. Because to them, they understand masculinity to a certain degree, just as a man does not understand femininity to a certain degree. And the idea to now all of a sudden create this battle between both results in disagreement. Now let's dive into, for example, the 72 different genders or feelings of experience that we have now considered to call sexual identities. Let me ask you something. Just because you prefer something, sexual orientation as an example, does that mean it is entirely what you are? I would agree that no. Sexual identity does not make you everything that you are. It is a feeling, a preference. But where do these preferences arise? When you analyze the idea that feminism was also introduced in the late 1960s, which is also when the psychedelic revolution took place in North America, in Europe, when you realize from a psychedelic or drug experience that each drug creates a new experience, a new feeling of experiencing life. Primarily women and men only know as they grow up what they are in themselves. But the moment you introduce drugs into the system of either a man or a woman, you all of a sudden begin experiencing a new feeling. If we are to say, well, a feeling does not mean that's everything that you are, okay. Are you angry? Are you happy? Are you sad? Because if we cannot say that a feeling to a certain point is an influencing factor as to who you are in this present moment, or at least how you act and portray yourself at that exact moment. Is it everything that you are? No. And yet, I would argue that most of these new genders we've introduced, these 72 new genders, I would argue that they are in fact a feeling that was developed and became a form of an orientation because, let's face it, folks, we live in a very drug-addicted society. Whether they be pharmaceutical or illegal narcotics, everyone is on something. And when you look at the transference of consciousness or the way your mind thinks while under the influence of a substance, whether it be an ADHD medication, which is a derivative of methamphetamines as an example, or an antidepressant, which is a derivative of ecstasy, or a antipsychotic, which is a mixture, a concoction. All of these different medications all have a root to a certain narcotic, which is why they have a pharmaceutical business, because we've literally turned narcotic drugs into medications now. And if you don't believe me, I would suggest you research what your antidepressant mimics. What drug, what narcotic drug is present in your antidepressant? What narcotic drug is present in your ADHD medication? And the list goes on and on and on. What I'm simply pointing out is that there is a feeling or an experience of a feeling that while under the influence of a different substance, we now see a different preference of experience. And that does not result in your identity, it is simply a preference Do you prefer to be called Pat or Patrick? I prefer to be called Pat. It's shorter. It's easier to remember. In that preference, I am still technically my name, but I prefer to be called this. And in that same way that we can say now, well, I prefer to be called he, she, they, them. We are literally seeing identity being based around a, how would you say, a complete withdrawal from self. Almost as a disorganized way of thinking. Or you could precisely say that it's really disoriented. I am so disoriented by the medications and drugs that I take that I no longer know how to self-identify, so I identify as a third person. It sounds harsh. I'm not trying to put down anybody that has a non-binary experience or a transgender experience. I am simply stating that before you began taking certain medications or drugs, was that truly how you felt? A feeling. And through the introduction of continuous consumption of these drugs or medications, did you as a person now see a transference in your preference of who you want to be? Because if we can no longer say that a feeling is a temporary present state of your identity, but in that same notion, that temporary present state of your identity is not forever, which is what most people would argue when it comes to transgenderism. It's not that we don't want you to be happy. It is simply that you might feel this way now. But the idea that you somehow have to cut off perfectly healthy body tissue in order to feel more like yourself, that's not medicine. That's self-harm. And self-harm is often caused and rooted in trauma. Let me ask you this, is your trauma a reason you pursue addiction? Whether it be a pharmaceutical addiction or an illegal drug narcotic addiction. Because if you can't get to the root of why you like to feel this way, how do you know who you are? That is the big question in all of this. Who are you? And to say that because you feel or prefer a certain sexual identity, we now somehow created all of these different minorities of people that feel this way because they are on something that makes them feel that way. All of these different drugs cause a different feeling or perception of self. And the more you mix them, all of a sudden you can say, well, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, and that, and the list is infinite. But if you were to realize that the reason the mind works, the reason your consciousness works, is because of drugs. If you don't believe me, what is LSD made of? What does it stimulate in your brain? Serotonin and dopamine, which are commonly present neurotransmitters in your brain. What does LSD or acid, commonly known as mushrooms, cocaine, dopamine, nicotine, dopamine, alcohol, dopamine, mushrooms, serotonin and dopamine, Methamphetamines, dopamine control. It causes a withdrawal of dopamine, but an instant rush. That's what all these drugs cause. And if you think that somehow you are based around a central experience of a drug, that is exactly who you are, I would argue that you don't know yourself at all. I would encourage each and every one of you to discover who you are without the use of your medications, without the use of drugs, without the use of something altering your perception of yourself. Because if we can no longer really center on ourselves what we are as a person, whether you are a man or a woman, because that's all that there is. All these other 72 genders are simply a feeling that you experience while you are on a altered state of consciousness. And the prolonged experience of this, the longer you maintain this altered state of consciousness, the more you begin to believe that that is your identity.